nightmares in my head. I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. Anxiety, filling up every space, no privacy. And silently, it could build and build until you finally see, whoa, it's taking over, damn, no closure, moving closer, no exposure, I just want...
Canada is a dream come true for many, however, if you're thinking about relocating. You may be wondering whether there are any reasons not to move to Canada. Yes! There are several reasons which will stop you from moving to Canada. 1. You really hate the cold. This is an obvious one, but it's also one of the main reasons people are put off moving to Canada. Canada does get freezing cold in winter, but what a lot of people don't realize is it also gets really hot in summer. In fact, the Canadian summers are absolutely beautiful, and the winters aren't actually as bad as people make them out to be. Winter is technically from December to February, but the cold will usually stretch from November until the end of March. And we even sometimes get a freak snowstorm or two in April. But the winter is only usually uncomfortably cold for a few weeks in January and early February. And during this time, we just tend to hibernate a lot. Luckily, the houses in Canada are built for the cold, so it's easy to stay toasty warm inside. However, if you really hate the cold, then Canada might not be right for you. Although the worst of the winter is short-lived, Canada is on the colder side for around 6 months of the year. And if you're not interested in taking up snow sports and embracing the cold, then you will find the winters painfully long. 2. Finding a job can be difficult. Canada is a country with lots of job opportunities, but finding your first job here can be a difficult and time-consuming task. Generally, recruitment processes in Canada move a lot slower than in many other countries. It's not unusual to apply for a job, assume you didn't get it, and then hear back several months later for an interview. Another challenge faced by new immigrants is that Canadian employers always prefer Canadian work experience. This can make it very difficult to land your first job in Canada, as employers might be reluctant to consider your international work experience and education. Luckily, once you land your first job in Canada, it becomes much easier to find your next job. So don't let your first Canadian job search put you off. When moving to Canada, make sure you're prepared for the job search to take time. It's best to plan ahead with enough money saved to cover your living expenses for at least 6 months, as it really can take this long to find a job. 3. You might not earn as much money here. Another employment challenge you may face in Canada is that your industry might not pay very well here. Although, on the other hand, you might instead find that your industry pays a lot more in Canada, as it can go both ways. Coming from Australia, some of the industries I noticed which don't pay as well in Canada are retail, hospitality, and construction. Such a significant change in earnings can be very difficult to adapt to and requires a big lifestyle adjustment. This could really taint your experience of living in Canada. Therefore, it's important to have a realistic understanding of what you will be able to earn in your profession in Canada so you can establish if this will be sufficient for your lifestyle.
I feel nauseous, believe me. Never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to rise up just so they could see me. Did what I had to do just to feed me. And what was left over I put towards my dreaming. But the only...
4. You're not outdoorsy, despite the long winters. Canadians are very outdoorsy people, and there are so many outdoor activities here in every season. Because of the long winters, Canadians really make the most of the warmer months, from hiking, camping, biking, kayaking and canoeing, to fishing, playing organized sports, or even just enjoying the local park. It seems like everyone is outside when the weather is nice, and the cold weather doesn't keep Canadians inside either. In the winter, people still head outside for a range of snow sports like skiing and snowboarding, snowshoeing, ice skating and hockey. As long as there isn't too much snow, you will still find people walking, running, playing team sports and biking outside in the colder months in Canada. There are also plenty of indoor activities to do in Canada, but there isn't as much of a focus on these as in many other countries. Therefore, if you aren't outdoorsy, you will miss out on so much of what Canada has to offer, and you may find yourself getting a bit bored here. 5. It can be expensive to travel in Canada. Canada is a big country with so much to see, but unfortunately traveling within Canada can actually be quite expensive. Given everywhere is so spread out, you can't just drive everywhere like you can in some places. Instead, you will often have to fly to travel within Canada, and those flights aren't usually much cheaper than flying overseas. Plus, other travel expenses like accommodation and car rentals can also be expensive in Canada. However, there are also plenty of ways to vacation here for cheap. Throughout the year, there are some really great flight deals. And if you travel in the off-season, spring and fall, you will find accommodation to be much cheaper then. Plus, the further in advance you book, the cheaper the prices tend to be. Alternatively, you could also try camping for a true Canadian vacation experience. Or you may find that it is actually cheaper to vacation abroad once you move to Canada. That is why so many Canadians will holiday in places like Mexico and South America. Therefore, if you're moving over with the dream of seeing everything Canada has to offer, make sure you understand that this does come at a premium. 6. You may struggle to find somewhere to live. Another challenge for newcomers to Canada can be finding somewhere to live. Housing prices have skyrocketed over the past few years and the housing market is very competitive. This is making it more difficult than ever to buy property and has raised rental prices. But finding somewhere affordable to live may not be your only challenge when you arrive in Canada. In Canada, you're required to provide your credit history to lease a property. Unfortunately, Canada doesn't recognize foreign credit reports. Therefore, it can be difficult to prove that you have good credit before you start building credit in Canada. When looking for a rental property, working with a realtor is a good way to get around this. They will often take into consideration your foreign credit reports and can then negotiate for you with the landlords. Another rental requirement is to prove that you have stable employment. Landlords want reassurance that you will be able to pay your rent throughout your lease, so they want to see proof of your income. This is a difficult requirement if you have just arrived in Canada and haven't yet found a job. One workaround is to pay several months' rent up front to ease the owner's concerns. This is another reason why you should have as much money as possible saved for your move to Canada. It's also good to book some temporary accommodation for when you first arrive, such as a hotel or vacation home. 7. The cost of living in Canada has skyrocketed. The cost of living has been rising all around the world, but this is particularly felt in countries like Canada, which have always been more expensive places to live. In addition, certain costs like housing have really skyrocketed in Canada in recent years, and unfortunately, salaries have not kept up with the rising inflation. As such, you now get less for your money in Canada, and rising cost of living can really be felt here. Of course, this will impact some people more than others. Canada is a country of opportunity and there are plenty of really well-paid professions here. So many people are not that affected by increased prices at the grocery store or have gotten lucky in the housing market. But for others, inflation has made it more difficult than ever to live comfortably, and this is definitely something to take into consideration when deciding whether or not you should move to Canada. 8. Prices don't include tax. Just like in the USA, price tags in Canada are misleading, as they never include tax. This can give you a false sense of what you can afford in Canada, and you will always find yourself having to do mental maths when you're buying anything. In Canada, you should always expect to pay more than the advertised price. Tax varies from province to province, with some only charging goods and services tax, GST, which is 5%, whereas other provinces charge harmonized sales tax, HST, which can be as high as 15%. So whenever I'm shopping, eating out, or getting a service, always expect to pay 13% more than the advertised price. Although it is worth noting that some items are exempt from HST, such as basic groceries, medical services, and insurance. When comparing the prices of things in Canada to what you're used to at home, make sure to factor in tax to get a true idea of what you will be spending once you move here. 9. You might have difficulties immigrating. While Canada has high immigration targets and various pathways available, immigrating here is not that easy for everyone. Therefore, it is often best to speak to a Canadian immigration lawyer to assess your options before you start the process. Factors like your age, professional experience, education, language skills, and marital status will affect your eligibility to immigrate to Canada permanently. And if you don't meet certain minimum criteria, it may be virtually impossible for you to gain residency here. Alternatively, if you're looking to move to Canada on a temporary basis, you will usually need to pursue eligible studies here which relate to your professional experience, or find an employer willing to sponsor you. This is much easier said than done, since employers may not qualify to sponsor you. They are also often reluctant to try these lengthy and expensive sponsorship processes unless you have a specific skill set, an experience which is in particularly high demand. If you do end up meeting the criteria to move to Canada through one of the various pathways, this still doesn't guarantee that you will be successful. Other factors can render you inadmissible, such as having a medical condition or criminal background, even minor offenses, ties to inadmissible family members, or failing to properly disclose information in your application. And even if your background check comes up clean, you will still be faced with an often lengthy and expensive application process, where the smallest error, missing piece of information, or failure to convince the officer of your intentions could result in a declined application. If you meet all the required criteria and are admissible to Canada, you may well find that immigrating is a smooth and easy process. However, for many it's not that simple, and the application processes can last months or years, be very costly, and result in a lot of disappointment. 10. Studying in Canada can be expensive. For many newcomers, studying in Canada is a prerequisite to immigrating here. One of the main pathways to permanent residency in Canada is first coming here temporarily on a study permit. However, doing this does not come cheap. As a temporary resident, you will have to pay international student fees to study here, which are very expensive. They can be as much as 6 times higher than domestic student fees. And even if you don't need to study to immigrate to Canada, you might find that once you move here, you will need to complete additional qualifications to work in your profession. Many professions in Canada will require or prefer you to have professional designations or a graduate degree. This can see you having to return to school or undertake additional courses or exams to pursue your chosen profession. Unfortunately, the cost of doing these extra studies can really add up. Although despite the high cost, Canada does have an excellent higher education system, and it is a great place to study, I know from experience. But if you can, I would recommend waiting until you become a permanent resident or citizen to study here, so you can pay domestic fees, as otherwise it is far too expensive. Leave your thoughts about Canada in comments. Please consider subscribing for more travel and geography insights.